The Sonic the Hedgehog movies are huge hits, each one being received better than the last. But how did they garner such praise when everything seemed stacked against it from the get-go? Everything from development hell to the waning trust of the fans of the games, to the fiasco that was the original design for the old Hedgehog himself, should have rendered the wannabe film franchise a massive failure. But you know what? It didn't. The Sonic movies have arguably saved the franchise from a slow and painful death, and thanks to them, the franchise as a whole is now thriving in ways I don't think anyone realistically expected after Forces. But why? What was the secret sauce behind these films that seemingly performed miracles for the brand? Well, I think I have the answer, and trust me, it may not be what you expect. And it definitely doesn't just have to do with that guy. Sonic the Hedgehog, the Blue Blur, the Knight of the Wind. We all know him. Or do we? Because I know damn well if I explained the video game series to an average Joe Schmo unfamiliar with the games, they'd have a lot of questions. Why is he so fast? What's with the rings? Why is the mustache guy trying to kill him? Why does he wear red sneakers? What's a Chaos Emerald? Why is he blue? I think this highlights just how much we're willing to accept as gamers. The truth is, a lot of those questions don't have answers. We just accept them because, well, it's a cool video game, so shut up. However, this can't necessarily have the same form of easy acceptance in film. A well-known big worry for studio executives when making video game adaptations is alienating new audience members. If you were to dump all of the recognizable elements from the Sonic games into a screenplay with as little explanation as the games give us, it just wouldn't be very watchable. Especially when you realize movies are made to appeal to a wider demographic, namely, general audiences. Ugh. I know, I nearly threw up when I said it. Yes, audiences can accept a certain level of just because, but past a certain point, you risk alienating them. This is where a little something called localization comes into play. Localization, as opposed to translation, is the process of adapting something according to a certain demographic or market. Here's an example to help you understand what I mean. If I were to translate the phrase "by the skin of your teeth" to Spanish exactly the same way, it would essentially imply that your teeth do in fact have skin. This is where language is localized to make sense in a different language. Por los pelos, meaning by the hair, would be the closest localization and translation of the phrase "by the skin of your teeth." You need to put it in the right context for people to understand what the phrase means. So what the hell does this have to do with any of the Sonic movies? Well, kind of everything. If Sonic just showed up on screen collecting rings while he runs for his life from a bloodthirsty whale, audiences would have a lot of questions. That would be the "your teeth have skin" moment for average moviegoers. Factoring in that there will inevitably be a large portion of the audience that have not and will never play a Sonic game, the task essentially becomes localization for people who think Sonic is just a fast food restaurant with really good food, followed by really bad tummy aches. I believe that this is the secret sauce behind the success of the Sonic films. Just hear me out for a second. Here's a brief summary of the first Sonic movie. An orphan space hedgehog named Sonic is teleported to Earth in order to avoid pursuers that want to steal his super speed powers. Lonely after years of essentially raising himself, he strikes up an unlikely friendship with a local police officer named Tom, and an even unlikelier rivalry with a government scientist named Dr. Robotnik. Robotnik wants to capture Sonic to study and experiment on him, but through the use of friendship and a newfound sense of belonging, Sonic unlocks the potential of his powers to defeat Robotnik and become a force of good for the world. Right off the bat, we're seeing a very safe, easy to understand plot structure. Creature from another planet? Seen it. CGI plus human characters road trip? Been there. Superhero origin story? Done that. Too much if we're being honest. So why was this plot chosen out of the plethora of plots that they could have pulled from the games? Well, if we're being honest, it was probably an executive decision, or just part of the pitch to Paramount from the get-go to save money on the project. It was in development hell for a while, and then it was placed into something called Turnaround and blah 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 blah. Point is, live action with one CGI character is a lot cheaper to make than completely CGI movie. What matters here is what the writers and director decided to do with their limitations. With this easy to understand foundation, general audiences could decide whether or not they were on board with the film. What separates this one from the rest? Sonic's iconography. You might be rolling your eyes at the screen right now. What iconography? The first movie's devoid of it. Right? Are you sure about that? Sonic starts out in Green Hill Zone. Sonic saves woodland creatures from harm. Sonic travels through portal rings. Sonic fights Dr. Robotnik by curling into a ball and flinging himself at Robotnik's machinery. Hell, the entire inciting incident that sets the plot in motion is essentially Sonic getting hit and losing his rings. And if that wasn't close enough for you purists, yeah, how's that? The iconography of the 1991 video game is all over this movie. Each of these things would have come off as shallow Easter eggs or callbacks in a worse film. But writers Patrick Casey and Josh Miller, and director Jeff Fowler, all with the help of Tyson Hess after that whole fiasco, really understand the act of recontextualizing elements from the game to the story of the movie. Every single thing I just listed from the games is incorporated into the plot of the film in an organic way that doesn't feel forced or like it's bribing us into loving it. This tightly wrapped the first Sonic movie into a neat little package, a safe one that gave us a buddy road trip movie through the filter of a Sonic video game. This gave audiences a taste for the Sonic brand, and fans a reason to come to the theater, both culminating in one of the biggest video game movie releases ever up to that point. And if you think that's impressive, wait until you hear about it. I don't know if people realize how much Sonic 2 had to do in order to succeed. See, the success of the first film was viewed as kind of a fluke by audiences. The Sonic-y elements were subtle enough for people to include as part of the happy accident. There was no guarantee that audiences would return for a sequel. However, what started as an entirely safe but new take on Sonic ended up becoming a way to ease audience members into familiar territory. By the time the trailer for Sonic 2 hit, it became so clear that this is probably the Sonic film the filmmakers wanted to make. There's a certain energy present in this one that just blows the first one out of the water. I mean, just look at the first movie's iconic moments compared to the second. It doesn't really matter whether or not you're a fan. You know this one looks like an improvement. But I haven't seen a single soul talk about how the film seamlessly transitions the tone of the first film into the more game-accurate movie we've come to love. The first film had the usual suspects of a fairly safe family film. Dancing, characters getting into hijinks, etc. All taking place in fairly familiar territories and settings for these kinds of movies. You can't just expect audiences to forget that and move on to an entirely different kind of movie. That's why stuff like Sonic and Tails having a dance battle in this Siberian bar exists, aside from the Hollywood-mandated dance scene quota in every single kids film ever. But then, game elements begin to take center stage, and it's honestly nothing short of a stroke of genius. We're in Siberia doing things you'd expect based on the last film, but then the story carries us to a hidden temple where we learn lore about the Chaos Emeralds. Simplified lore so that we don't have to endure the plot devolving into a fetch quest every time the emeralds are needed. Now it's just the Master Emerald, which houses all 7 Chaos Emeralds. A change that, as a fan of the games, I'm not super keen on, but as somebody who understands the appeal to these films, I'm totally fine with. One magical MacGuffin is a lot easier to write for and understand than 7 plus 1. Then, bam! Eggman and Knuckles show up in a very familiar pod. As a result of this conflict, we're suddenly snowboarding down a snowy mountain in desperate attempt to get away from the villains, halting the plot from progressing. This is ripped straight out of Ice Cap Zone and Sonic 3. See, localizing things for audience members to get more on board with these video gamey elements. We seamlessly go from one thing to another, steadily bringing in elements from the game. Would you look at that? The resort from Sonic Adventure 1. Okay, that might be a bit of a stretch, but if we're seriously calling this Mushroom Hill Zone, then I get to call this Emerald Coast, okay? Anyway, the localization doesn't stop there. Eggman and Knuckles are on track to find the fabled Master Emerald, which is hidden somewhere on Earth. Well, as average moviegoers, years of adventure films have told us that magical MacGuffins are typically held in mysterious, long-lost temples or ruins. So, Labyrinth Zone. And what's so cool about it, aside from literally everything, is that it gives us a peek into the writer's philosophy here. Labyrinth Zone is far from people's favorite zone in the Sonic games. In fact, most people would agree that it might be the worst zone in the first game. So why include it? Because the writers aren't forcing a way to interject shallow fan service. They're finding ways to incorporate elements from the games only if they make sense within the confines of the story being told. I really could keep going with this. Knuckles and Sonic fight until Knuckles realizes he's been deceived by Eggman, just like in Sonic 3. When he takes the Emerald, the power keeping the labyrinth from flooding is gone, recreating the iconic flooding from the level. Plus, Sonic has to use air bubbles to breathe, just like in the game. After Eggman got his hands on the Master Emerald, he unlocks God Mode and builds a massive machine to end Sonic once and for all. His mech is ripped straight out of the game. Earlier during the wedding scene, we see a plane fly by with a message for our lovely wedded couple, leading to Tails presumably stealing the plane. That's right, the Fox Boy's a criminal. This gives Tails his iconic tornado from the games. Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles work together to defeat Eggman, and best of all, Sonic uses the Chaos Emeralds to go super and kick some ass. Sonic 3 is here, and it's pretty insane. It uses all of the same localization tricks I've discussed in this video tenfold. I mean, just look at these side-by-sides. Yeah, insane. But you know what? I want to encourage you to go out and see it for yourself. Really pay attention to those fan servicey moments and ask yourself, how did they manage to put this in so seamlessly? There's context and localization to nearly every single moment, and I think that's something worth appreciating. So why did I make this video? Well, a few reasons. 1. Most people attribute the success of these films to the goodwill the filmmakers made by listening to the outcry of fans with that whole first design fiasco. Something I find a tad bit unfair to insinuate at this point. I'm arguing that it's much deeper than that. It's the willingness to change things for the better in addition to understanding what makes a good adaptation. It's finding a way to contextualize and localize everything we want as Sonic fans without turning off outsiders. It's what makes these films so easily digestible and satisfying to fans and newcomers alike. 2. I'm a filmmaker myself. A very small filmmaker, make no mistake, but a filmmaker nonetheless. I have a lot of room to learn and grow, and one of the ways I do that is by watching movies that inspire me. Sonic the Hedgehog, one of, if not my favorite video game character of all time, getting not 1, not 2, but 3 live-action films that were actually good is like a colliding of worlds for me. And 3, most importantly, when I was a kid, I used to dream of a Sonic the Hedgehog movie. I mean, seriously, it's how I would get myself to fall asleep. I would lay there, eyes closed, imagining what a movie like these would be like in hopes that those ideas would carry over into my dreams as I fall asleep. That part of me, in here, can't believe that we're actually to this point. I could have bored you to death with filmmaker mumbo jumbo or something, but I wanted to keep this simple and easily digestible. So, to put it simply, it's just neat to be able to see and appreciate these movies as a fan of the franchise and as a fan of the medium. I love these movies, and I hope that after watching this video, you love them just a little bit more. Oh, I also wanted to shout out this guy for this awesome History of the Sonic movie video. I just thought it was really good, really neat, really fascinating, and you did a good job. You're fucking awesome. Go watch that video if you haven't seen it. Okay, bye.